RJ Barrett is putting up a ton of points for the Raptors this season, but he's not doing so very efficiently or efficiently at all, especially compared to what he was doing last season with the Raptors. So 15 games into his season, is it time for Raptors fans to really start worrying about the Canadian? Let's get into it. Welcome back, everybody. This is Amateur Sports, the YouTube channel dedicated to Toronto Raptors content in live stream watch-alongs for Raptors games and videos just like this. If you enjoyed this one along the way, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel as well for more Raptors content. And remember, Amateur merch drops on Friday, November 29th. I have shirts, hats, and stickers. Great stuff. The merch came out great. Cannot wait to show it to you guys. You'll want to keep an eye out for when it does end up dropping. But today's video, it's not going to be a laughing matter here. Should Raptors fans be worried about RJ Barrett and the way he has played to start this season? The Raptors are 4-14. RJ Barrett has played in 15 games this season, and especially after the most recent loss to Detroit Pistons, there's been some scrutiny going around online for the way RJ Barrett has been playing. And what we're going to try and answer from today's video is if it's justified, because when I said RJ Barrett is putting up a ton of points this season, he is doing just that. He has a usage percentage near 30%, which is in the top 30 in the NBA this season of players who have played at least 10 games, and he's putting up 22.8 points. Like, that's a good amount of points, a healthy amount of points towards this Raptors team, despite all of the losses. We know players can play well despite the losses, but some people are suggesting maybe some of the losses are as a result of some of the play of RJ Barrett this season. So what we're going to do in the video, we're going to dissect some of the advanced metrics surrounding RJ Barrett's efficiency this season to see just how bad or how good it is. We're going to compare it to what he was doing with the Raptors last season. And then we're actually going to compare it to see what he was doing with the New York Knicks in his last full season with that team to see what kind of RJ Barrett we are currently dealing with. And at that point, once we go through all of these numbers, we'll be able to have the final decision at the end of the video if Raptors fans should be worried about the player. Like I said, 22.8 points per game so far this season for the Raptors, but the efficiency has just not been there, especially when compared to his time with the Raptors last season, where he played in 32 games and put up some ridiculous statistics. Now, I said with these statistics that it's likely they were not going to sustain. He was just playing out of his mind for the Raptors, but there was definitely a bigger drop than expected here. He's averaging 1 more point per game than he was last season because he's taking 4 more shots per game and his usage is so high. But his field goal percentage has dropped from 55.3 down to 42.7. And I think the biggest thing that I'm unhappy with seeing here is his 2-point percentage, having gone from above 60%, which I knew wouldn't hold up, but it's down all the way to 47.2. Like, you really want that to be above 50 for a guy who is as drive heavy, getting to the rim as much as RJ Barrett. His 3-point percentage has dropped from 39.2 down to 32.6. Again, I would have thought we could keep this in the 34, 35, 36% range, but that's not the case. And compiling all of his efficiency metrics, we get the true shooting percentage, which has gone from 615 down to 518. True shooting does also factor in his free throws, which have been a little bit down compared to normal as well this season, but at least it does measure a player's ability to get to the line, which RJ Barrett is doing this season. The effective field percentage at the end here only measures 3-pointers and 2-pointers, but it weighs them in such a way that does value 3-pointers more because that shot is worth more than 2-pointers. His effective field percentage has gone from 60.1 down to 47.7. Yeah, it hasn't been super efficient, and it's been a lot worse than last season, but last season was so good. How do these efficiency numbers stack up to the rest of the NBA? Well, I compiled all of this data as well. I went through only players who have played in at least 10 games this season because that's a good enough sample size that you can actually gather some information in the early stages, still the early stages of this NBA season. I took only players who have played at least 10 games and have a usage percentage above 25%, just like RJ Barrett does. There are 53 such players who have enough usage and have enough games played to be factored into this data. And for RJ Barrett, in the true shooting percentage, he is ranked 45th out of those 53 players. And for effective field percentage, he is also ranked 45th out of those 53 players. Not a great look, especially when you consider some of the names around him here. Jalen Green, Jordan Clarkson, Kyle Kuzma, Anthony Simons, Kevin Porter Jr., Marjon Beauchamp. Not the right company you want to keep around you as far as efficiency is concerned. So is that a reason to be really upset with the way RJ Barrett's playing? Should Raptors fans start to worry about him? Well, let's compare these numbers to what he was doing with the New York Knicks. Let's go to his last full season with the New York Knicks to make it a little bit more fair. In his last full season with the New York Knicks, which was 22-23, he played in 73 games where his usage and his field goal attempts were not as high. He was averaging 19.6 points per game. Field goal percentage, 43.4, similar to what we're seeing right now with the Raptors. 2-point percentage was a little bit higher at 49.5. 3-point percentage a little bit lower, but his true shooting percentage and effective field percentage were slightly higher. Not suggesting that these are very good true shooting percentages or especially effective field goal percentages, but they were higher compared to what he is doing currently with the Toronto Raptors through 15 games for him so far this season, having missed a few games for the Raptors. So these efficiency numbers are more in line with what we saw with the New York Knicks. In fact, I'd say they are very similar. The RJ Barrett that the Raptors are currently getting is the one that we have seen previously with the New York Knicks. It's the one we've seen previously with the New York Knicks that when the Raptors traded for him right at the end of 2023, I think it was December 30th, 2023, from the Knicks alongside Emmanuel Quickley in the trade that sent OG Anunoby to the New York Knicks. These were the sort of statistics I was looking at and I was not too excited about. I wouldn't say I was not excited about getting RJ Barrett, a Canadian player, a talented player, but there was a reason I was skeptical about how well RJ Barrett could play for the team. And my goodness, I mean, the numbers he put up for the Raptors kind of blew that opinion out of the water. And I pretty much apologize for such an opinion. I knew some of those levels were not going to sustain from last season, but it was a 32-game sample size. He looked as good as that at the Olympics for Team Canada. I know it's another short sample size. And especially his first preseason game before he got injured. And at least at the start of the season for the Raptors, some of these numbers were very reminiscent of what he did last season. I didn't think they would fully sustain, especially as, we would see maybe his usage and his field goal attempts go up. It would make it a little bit harder to sustain those numbers. But this is a big plummet here. This is a really big drop off, unfortunately, for RJ Barrett from a statistical standpoint. We're not talking down from a field percentage of 55 down to 48. We're talking 55.3 down to 42.7. We're talking a 2-point percentage going from above 60% down to 47%. The 2-point percentage I really wanted to see still above 50%, and that I think would have been acceptable. The 3-point percentage going from 39, I knew he wouldn't do that again, but I wanted to see it keep around 36, 35%, and hasn't done that. So as far as what we're getting out of RJ Barrett, are these things concerning? Yes. Should Raptors fans worry about the player? I think there's some slight alarms that should creep in here. However, in my defense of RJ Barrett, it's only been 15 games, not a monster sample size. It's only about half of the sample size from last year, so it's already at that point where it's almost half of what it was last year for the Raptors, those 32 games he played with the Raptors. But 15 games is still a relatively small sample size. The Raptors have had a pretty difficult start to the season, and with all of the injuries, they have leaned so heavily on RJ Barrett. He is having to do so much work to create his shot right now because there's just not a lot of help around him. Now, Scotty Barnes is back. Hopefully, that starts to help RJ Barrett turn a corner, but there wasn't a point guard really that could handle the ball and create. So RJ Barrett was essential. I know they have Davion Mitchell, but RJ Barrett was playing as the lead ball handler, lead playmaker, almost as the point guard for the Raptors, having to just get downhill and get his shots on his own. Now, he did that so successfully last season, not in the same sort of capacity, but it is telling that his usage percentage has gone up 5% compared to last season with the Raptors. So it's slightly alarming, but there are some reasons why it could be the case for Barrett. And also, he was injured to start the season. Is he still feeling the ailments of that? I would say that's not really as big of an excuse, but you can definitely use the excuse that it's a small sample size. Maybe he's struggling a little bit coming off of that injury. And you could definitely make the case that there just wasn't enough help around him for him to be more selective with his shots. What was so impressive about his time with the Raptors last year compared to what he was with the Knicks was his shot selection had improved so vastly. And I think a lot of that has gone away this season. And I think part of it is because he's having to do a lot more on his own with this team and the caliber of his teammates right now. But I do think some of it is on RJ Barrett himself falling back into some of the old habits that plagued him in his time with the New York Knicks. So the TLDR of this one, if you skip right to the end, should Raptors fans be concerned about RJ Barrett? If you thought, the guy who shot 55% from the field, 39% from three, if you thought that guy was just going to keep on trudging along at those numbers, you should be concerned because it's probably not going to come back to that. But if you were more realistic and thought, okay, let's keep the field goal percentage, even just high 40s, maybe low 50s. Let's keep the three-point percentage at least 35, 36%. If you thought that was something you'd want out of RJ Barrett as his role increased, usage increased, field goal attempts increased, I wouldn't necessarily be worried here, but I think that sort of seed of doubt is starting to creep in here about, okay, was that stint of 32 games with the Raptors just an absolute purple patch, a purple patch of madness where he just took Toronto by storm? Some of that doubt is starting to creep in a little bit, but as players start to come back, especially Scotty Barnes, we may start to see a new RJ Barrett and the old but new RJ Barrett start to creep back into the fray. We may have to revisit this topic in another 17 or so games. So it's 32 games this season, 32 games last season, just to see where he's at and if we do see improvement. Because if we don't, then maybe Raptors fans should start to worry. So what do you make of RJ Barrett's game this season? There's been a lot of scrutiny around the player, but give me your thoughts on the player in the comments down below. That's all for today's video. Drop a like if you did enjoy. Make sure you do subscribe to the channel for more Raptors content like this, and keep a lookout. Amateur merch drops November 29th, which is this Friday. It's going to be released probably about 6 p.m. Eastern time. Keep a lookout for the official release video, and I'll talk more about it on the watch-along, which is going on that night as the Raptors take on the Miami Heat in the NBA Cup. I hope to see you there.